Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maximo and I'm here checking out the remake of Panzer Dragoon. This is on the Switch because it's going to be exclusive to it for a while, and I figured I've always wanted to play Panzer Dragoon in some form or another, so why not? This is indeed a remake, although they didn't really remake much. They basically just gave it a shinier coat of paint and a few tweaks in the controls department, which we'll go over shortly. You can see on my stats screen that I've been through the game once, and I was actually a little bit surprised by that. I wasn't expecting the game to be over and done with inside of an hour, but there you go. So I figured I'd just pop it straight into video recording mode and see what we can do about it. So there are some options. Some of them are obvious. You do also have the ability to change your controls, but the annoying thing about this is that you can't actually change the controls once you're in game. So if you find that you don't like the modern controls or you think the classic controls are a bit too stiff for you, you can't come back out and change them without dumping your progress entirely, which seems entirely unnecessary. Bit of a bad mark on you there, guys, but you can see the modern controls here, which are definitely new. It actually allows you to move and aim independently, and you shoot using the shoulder buttons. Or should I say the trigger buttons, depending on how you want to call them, ZL and ZR. Let me tell you this though, don't play this game on a regular Nintendo Switch. Not the Lite, just the regular Switch when it's undocked, because it's actually surprisingly painful. Very hard to keep playing for more than a few minutes at a time, excuse me. And, of course, you've got your classic mapping here. Works about as you expect, but I actually don't mind the modern control scheme otherwise, although I might have appreciated the ability to put shooting onto one of the face buttons or something, but yeah, we'll just leave it as is. Also the crosshair sensitivity, which you also can't adjust in-game and starts out a little bit too high. It's a bit frustrating if I'm being perfectly honest. I played through with the controller sensitivity at the default, and I did manage to get through the game with it, with a few deaths, as you could have seen on the stats screen there, but oh well. We'll just hit start game. Oh, there's a continue button there. Crap, I wish I'd seen that before. Wonderful, okay. So, easy, normal, and hard. We're going to go with normal again. I played through the game on normal, and I did manage to get through on my first try with a few deaths along the way. Annoying thing about continuing in this game, it puts you right back at the start of the stage, so if you died on the boss, have fun with that. So this is the cutscene. There's no speech or anything. I mean, there is a couple of subtitled lines, but that's about it. And honestly, I had no idea what the story was until I went and looked it up online. Basically, the world's screwed. Some guy is in the middle of a fight with another guy over a dragon and some ancient technology. You have to... one of them comes down and says, hey, can you help? You take his dragon and go to stop the bad guy. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. And that's more or less the only story there is. You going and flattening everyone in your way. Because beep beep, I'm a dragon. I think that's enough of that. You get the idea. There'll be cutscenes through some of this anyway, so... I don't plan on playing the entire game because I'm not going to need that long to talk about how I feel about the entire thing. I will point out that I've only ever played the original Panzer Dragoon in like a couple of minute bursts at the very beginning of the game. I never went further than the first level. There are 7 in total. Also, yeah, the loading times aren't particularly great. They're just long enough to be obnoxious. Just long enough. Thankfully, the stages tend to last a pretty decent length of time, so that you don't have to worry too much about the game loading, but yeah, they can still be a bit long. And I will also say the technical performance of this game is not great. there are a fair few situations where the frame rate just tanks, especially in the 4th episode I found, the one where you're in the underground cavern style thing. It can be a bit rough on the frame rate, that section, especially if you're playing in handheld. It almost reminded me of playing the original Panzer Dragoon on like a Saturn emulator, because the original Saturn version of Panzer Dragoon ran at 20 frames per second, and this actually dropped close enough to 20 frames a second to make me feel a bit reminiscent of it, because man, it was very not smooth, I'll promise you that much. So yes, for those of you who've never played Panzer Dragoon before, it is a on-rails shooter along the lines of, say, Rez, or a few other games which completely skip my mind right now. If you're on the modern control scheme, you move with the left stick, you aim with the right stick, and you've got two different attacks. You've got a regular old-fashioned shot, which you can throw out by pressing one of the ZL and ZR buttons, or you can hold it down to activate a lock-on attack. The lock-on attack fires out multiple missiles at a time, depending on if you can lock onto multiple enemies at a time, and it's also basically the weapon you'll be using for the entire game, because it's almost completely unnecessary to use anything else. It doesn't lock onto everything. You need to manually aim and shoot missiles and other sort of projectiles like that, and there are also very, very few enemies who won't get hit with the lock-on. But, for the most part, you'll be using your lock-on. Although it's kind of annoying when you end up running into a boss that is immune to everything related to the lock-on, and you can only use your regular shot, because it means you have to hammer away at the buttons. Like so. Like, can you hear this in the microphone? You have to hammer away at the buttons like that. And it can be a little bit unpleasant. It's why the original controls of this game are actually kind of smart, because hammering away on a button doesn't hurt as much as hammering away on these triggers do, at least on the Switch controllers. I'm having a much easier time with the lower controller sensitivity and the triggers on the Pro controller, because they're just more comfortable. If you're on Joy-Cons, it's not going to be very pleasant at all, I will admit. But it still works okay, you don't really need much else. I have also been told that there's a rolling attack, but I'd be lying if I said I knew how to do it. The game doesn't offer much in the way of a tutorial or manual, so if there is a rolling attack of some kind, I have no idea how you do it. I've got all the buttons here, but it just doesn't seem to want to tell me about it. You do also have the ability to change your camera angle, which actually a pretty neat idea, although it can get a little bit annoying when you start getting overrun by monsters, because you have to turn to the left, you have to turn to the right, and you can also turn around, and the only time you can actively dodge shots is when you're facing forward, which I think is a little weird. At least I believe that's a little weird. Enemies can and will get behind you and to your sides from time to time. The game isn't a massive dick about it, which I appreciate. It does put in the effort of automatically changing the camera angle so that you don't have to worry about turning if a particular enemy gets to the sides or behind you. But again, in just big swarms of regular old-fashioned enemies, it just doesn't work that way. You'll just find yourself getting swarmed without much comeuppance. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, the Joy-Cons suck for playing this, because it can be really hard to tell on those when you've really pressed the button down, and it doesn't help because there's a slight delay between pressing the button to turn your camera around and the camera actually turning. So the squishy Joy-Con L and R buttons, again, really don't help with that, because they just make it not so obvious when you've actually pressed the button. It's way more comfortable when you're playing on the Switch Pro controller like I am right now, because you get that very definitive feel underneath your fingers that you've pressed the button, and it'll just like let you swap sides nice and comfortably. You can also press both buttons at once when you're facing forward to immediately face backwards, which is not something you need to do very often, but it's cool that you can do it. Also, the game doesn't really tell you about this. Come on. Ow. See what I mean when I say there's only certain things that you can lock onto with the lock-on attack? That's my phone going off, because of course it is. You gotta try and save as much health as possible, because you do carry on your health plus a little bit of healing to the next level of the game. It's alright, he's almost dead anyway. See? Now that he can take shots to the back, it's time to give him a little whack. That was one level of 7, so it really is a short game. One of the things I was actually kind of disappointed about with the way the levels and the stages just overall are laid out is that there's a lot of opportunities they kind of pass up for things like branching stages and special little game modes and stuff like that, you know? Just little things that would add a little bit extra to the experience, but no, it seems to be pretty much a straight up just polishing of the original Panzer Dragoon. Bit higher frame rate, bit more intact controls, a little bit just, you know, polish in every nook and cranny without adding anything, and that's a little bit disappointing. What I will say though is that the game is actually really gorgeous. They've done a really good job at giving it a visual coat of paint, and it just looks nice. The enemy models, most of the effects, although the lock-on effects and the bullet effects are a little bit, like, underdone, but at the same time, that's basically what they looked like back on the Saturn anyway, so there's not really much more you could do with it, which is why I'm going to give it a pass. The game itself overall does look great. The soundtrack is basically the same though. Like, to my knowledge, I have heard that intro soundtrack to Panzer Dragoon a fair amount, and it honestly sounds almost exactly the same, just cleaned up a little, like recorded into a higher capacity MP3 file or something like that, you know what I mean? Just a bit more quality to it. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised because the overall quality of the soundtrack to Panzer Dragoon was also fantastic. But yeah, I just gotta say, it's a little weird. Just a little, like not too much, but again, the soundtracks of these games are fantastic, so I'll give it a pass, which is what I've been doing a lot lately. I also don't remember that radar being there, but again, I really haven't played much of... Oh, they're below me. Again, I really haven't played much of Panzer Dragoon, so if that was there before, forgive me. But this is legitimately something I don't know that much about. Oh yeah, I remember this bit. It's a bitch. This is where you get attacked from all sides by the... I call them scarabs. They're not scarabs, but they're the first thing I thought of. Yeah, here they come from the left now, because you can see them on the radar. Oh, this one's coming from behind. I got lucky on that one. I will at least say that outside of the performance problems though, this is an absolutely acceptable way to play Panzer Dragoon with, especially the new control experience, although I am a bit worried that the new controls actually make the game a little bit too easy, because when you first start playing Panzer Dragoon, if you've been playing games for a while, if you've kind of got an eye for like the sort of changes that this sort of control style would make to the design of an old game, you'll realize that it feels a bit weird, and you might even struggle with dodging bullets and all that, because from what I remember of the original game, moving and aiming were both the same thing. You couldn't do the two separately. So the game's designed around the idea that you're capable of both moving and shooting with the one analog stick. So when you've got access to both at once, it can be a little odd. Just a little bit weird in terms of like the overall game design. The game's still plenty of fun without it though. Because the environments are creative, full of gigantic things to add gigantic bullet-shaped holes into. And I will admit that it really is just enjoyable, even today. Clearly, Panzer Dragoon didn't age, like, well, has barely aged in comparison. Because all it really needed to look good was a shiny coat of paint. That's all it really needed, and it's fine. It plays pretty damn well. And outside of the fact that the remake didn't really add anything, just gave it a fresh coat of paint, and well, considering that it's on the Nintendo Switch and it's got really bad performance, like you can see how the frame rate's dropping just in this level alone when too many of these bugs and the effects are on screen at once. But when it actually shows up on like more capable platforms, like say the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and you know the PC, when it actually shows up on those platforms, it'll probably run not only fine, it'll probably run fantastically. So, yeah. I don't have a problem with the remake of Panzer Dragoon. It legitimately is a good... I hesitate to call it remake, because really it's a remaster. That's what it is. I'm surprised they decided to call it a remake. I mean, sure, they redid it from the ground up, but it legitimately feels almost exactly like the original in that sense. They've done, if they did remake it like from the ground up, they did a really good job of it. Because it feels almost as I remember as I was playing it on the Saturn emulator. That first stage is very familiar indeed. If this is inaccurate to the original version of it, I'd be lying if I said I could notice it. It's still just a good game. And on that notion alone, I'm willing to give it a recommend, except for one problem in particular. The price. Now, Panzer Dragoon, as I showed by the stats screen earlier, is a game that lasts an hour. I mean, sure, you could need to replay the game multiple times in order to get through specific stages. See what I mean when I say the camera moves with you? It's not an absolute dick. You could need to play the game a fair amount. You could need to repeat a little bit in order to get through the game on hard and get the extended ending to the story, which I will admit I still did not get. But it's a game that takes about an hour to finish on normal, has no real replay value in form of like procedurally generated waves, other sorts of challenges, little extra modes on top that could keep the hardcore people playing. Things like that, you know? Nothing, no interesting extras on top. As far as I can tell, it doesn't even have the same cheat codes that the original had, and the original actually had a fair few interesting cheat codes. You had things along the lines of only being able to ride as the dragon and not have like the lock-on ability, the ability to do rolling attacks at any time. Just some more fun cheat codes like that. With that said, you have to pay $25. Yeah, see, all progress will be lost. I wasn't too far out of the ordinary. I wasn't too far out of the way of thinking that I had to go back to the main menu to change the control scheme or turn down the sensitivity of the stick or anything like that. But yeah, the game is $24.99 US for a game that can be beaten in an hour and has no massive amounts of replay value except playing through the entire game again on hard to get the extended story ending, of which there isn't that much. So I have to admit, it feels like it's not really worth that much. If it was $14.99 or less, I'd be like, you know what, it's well worth it, I recommend it, as long as you don't mind the fact that it only lasts an hour. But putting it at $25 really gives me pause, just because it seems like a bit much. They did a good job with it, but again, it's an hour long. And it's just kind of hard to convince people to say $25 for a game that only lasts an hour and doesn't have much in the way of replay value. Although I do love how the way that ship crashes. 10 out of 10 IGN. Is it a good game? Yes. Is it $25 good? Debatable. I do like it. I just, yeah, $25 just seems like a bit much for me. I have bought this with my own money, by the way, so it's not like I'm saying this from nowhere. But if I had to buy it again, or rather if I was buying it for the first time again, and I didn't really know much about Panzer Dragoon, I'd be struggling to justify $25. With that said though, like the moment this goes on sale for like 40% off, it is well worth it at that price. And if you're a fan of Panzer Dragoon, you've already picked this up. Because, well, it's a remaster of Panzer Dragoon. There is also a second remaster coming. Although I wonder if it's going to be the same way. Is it going to be the same deal? Just the game remastered with no real, like, extra little goodies on top. It's entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that they might actually do something interesting with it. But who knows? With that said, I do like it though. And if you like what you see here and you don't mind the fact that the game's only an hour long, then you know what? You go right ahead. You go right ahead. It's a fun game. Performance is a little bit shit. They could do with a couple of tweaks, like, you know, letting you change your controls in-game in case you don't like the classic or the modern styles. But other than that, it's good. I'm happy I finally got around to playing it. Because it is certainly one of those legendary Saturn games that everyone keeps going on about. I'm always up to playing a game that I missed in the past. And this is absolutely a good way to play. It's given me a very good impression of what the game was like on the Saturn. Although, admittedly, it might be a bit more difficult if you've got the aim cursor and the moving on the one thing, but, well, I'm not going to talk about that because I didn't play the game that way at all. So yeah, that was a look at the Panzer Dragoon remake. It's good. It's got a few technical issues. It's a bit weird that you can't do things like change your controls mid-game, and they haven't really added anything on top to really justify a $25 price tag for an hour's worth of gameplay. But it's still not a bad remaster. And I do not mind it in the slightest, really. I give it a thumbs up. A thumbs up. If you like Panzer Dragoon, you'll probably like this. If you looked at that gameplay and thought to yourself, oh, you can hit continue, then what was all that with the all your progress will be lost thing? And the, yeah, weird, but yeah, minor issues on an otherwise pretty good game. And a pretty good remake of a pretty decent classic. So, there you go. Would I recommend it for 25 bucks? Not outright. Would I recommend it if it went on sale for like 15 bucks or less? Absolutely. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.